Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tearing into the constitutional rulebook of citizenship and looking at exactly how the United States guarantees equality. We're going to dive deep into some of the most powerful and, honestly, most heavily debated words in American history. We'll see how our entire understanding of rights, liberties, and government limits was totally transformed during the Reconstruction era. Let's get into it. Imagine this for a second. You're a newly freed person right after the end of the American Civil War. You've just been promised liberty by the federal government, but on the ground, you're facing local laws that still restrict literally your every move. They dictate where you can work, and they outright deny you basic constitutional protections. This is the massive historical problem we're exploring today. How exactly did the Constitution evolve to bridge this huge gap between a promise of freedom and the harsh reality on the ground? Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the origins of the 14th Amendment, citizenship and equal protection, civil liberties versus civil rights, the evidence to claim model, a quick retrieval check, and finally, the final takeaway. Section 1. Origins of the 14th Amendment. Okay, so the Civil War ends in 1865, but almost immediately Southern states started passing these highly discriminatory laws known as Black Codes. I mean, these codes were essentially designed to drag formerly enslaved people back to a status that looked an awful lot like serfdom. People could literally be arrested just for being unemployed. Crazy, right? Well, Congress, specifically the radical Republicans at the time, realized that just abolishing slavery wasn't going to cut it. They had to force the states to guarantee equal civil and legal rights. So by June of 1866, they submitted the 14th Amendment to do exactly that, and it was fully ratified by July 1868. Section 2. Citizenship and Equal Protection. This specific sentence right here is known as the Citizenship Clause, and it is an absolute game changer. It officially granted national citizenship to formerly enslaved people. In plain English, it means if you're born here, or if you go through the legal process to become a citizen, which we call naturalization, you are a citizen, period. Before this, the Constitution was actually pretty vague on who exactly was a citizen, and state laws had been actively denying those rights to Black Americans. This one single sentence wiped all those old discriminatory state laws right off the books. This established a massive constitutional baseline. Your citizenship is tied to where you're born or naturalized, not who you are or what your background is. It created a standard, national rule for citizenship that no individual state could just ignore or take away. But wait, the amendment actually goes even further. Historically, the Supreme Court had ruled that the Bill of Rights only applied to the federal government. But with this text, the 14th Amendment looked right at the states and said, no. You cannot deprive people of due process, meaning fair legal procedures, and you absolutely cannot deny them the equal protection of your laws. You can think of this as your constitutional golden rule for equality. It prevents publicly funded entities, we're talking your local public school, state universities, your town government, from treating you differently without a very valid legal reason. Because of this clause, government actions have to treat similarly circumstanced people exactly alike. Section 3. Civil liberties versus civil rights. So people mix these up all the time, but think of civil liberties as a protective shield. There are strict limits on government power over your personal freedoms, things the government absolutely cannot do to you. On the other hand, civil rights are more like the scales of justice. They ensure active, equal treatment by the government when they provide a service. But here's the critical catch you have to remember. These constitutional rights, they don't just survive on autopilot. They require civic responsibilities from us. It's our duty as citizens to stay informed, to participate in our communities, and to vote, to make sure those shields and scales actually work in the real world. To make this super concrete, let's look at the Bill of Rights. The government cannot tell you what religion to practice, it can't stop you from speaking your mind, and it absolutely cannot subject you to cruel and unusual punishment. These are your civil liberties, hard, non-negotiable limits placed on government authority just to protect your individual freedoms. On the flip side, civil rights ensure that when the government does provide a service, it does so equally. Public schools can't exclude students based on race. Voting access must be protected for everyone. But remember that balancing act we talked about? Having the constitutional right to equal voting access is your protected civil right, but actually showing up to the polls and casting an informed ballot, that right there is your civic responsibility. Section 4. The evidence to claim model. Whenever you're analyzing civics, you want to follow these 3 simple steps to build a bulletproof argument. First, boldly state your claim. Second, bring in the receipts. cite your evidence by directly quoting the historical or legal text. And third, explicitly make the connection. Explain exactly how that quote proves your initial claim. Let's try it out. We'll use Congressman John A. Bingham, the primary author of the first section of the 14th Amendment. The National Archives notes his intent was to, quote, nationalize the Bill of Rights. That simply means he wanted to make sure those first 10 amendments didn't just limit the president or Congress, but they put hard limits on your state governor and your state lawmakers too. So, using Bingham's quote as our evidence, we can successfully connect it to make this claim. The 14th Amendment radically shifted power to protect citizens from their own state governments. The connection here is super clear. If Bingham's intent was to make the Federal Bill of Rights binding on the states, then the 14th Amendment fundamentally changed American federalism. It finally allowed the federal government to step in when a state abuses its own citizens' liberties. Section 5. Retrieval check. All right, take a second to think about this one. If the Constitution guarantees equal protection, and it says similarly circumstanced people must be treated alike, can the government legally discriminate against a 10-year-old who really wants a driver's license? Are they breaking the 14th Amendment by treating minors differently than adults? The answer is no, it's not a violation at all. The courts actually use different tests to figure this stuff out. Keeping 10-year-olds off the highway easily passes what's called the rational basis test, mostly because, well, it's just a common-sense move for public safety. But if a law discriminates based on gender, like, say, a state military college refusing to admit women, courts look at it much, much closer, under intermediate scrutiny, and it usually fails, making it unconstitutional. And if a law discriminates based on race or religion, courts apply the highest level of suspicion, known as strict scrutiny. Today, laws like that are almost never allowed to stand. Section 6, the final takeaway. Okay, here are your core takeaways for today. The 14th Amendment entirely reshaped citizenship and demanded equal protection, which overturned all those discriminatory state laws. It gave us a framework balancing our civil liberties and civil rights, which, remember, ultimately rely on our own civic responsibilities to uphold them. And finally, proving this history requires using direct text to build strong, evidence-based claims. I'm going to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought. As history shows us, the words on a page are really only as strong as the people who demand they be enforced. The 14th Amendment wasn't just some quick fix for the year 1868. It is a living, breathing promise. Everyday citizens are still fighting in courtrooms today to define, apply, and expand exactly what equal protection and due process mean in our modern world. So what role will you play in that ongoing story? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible history behind your constitutional rights.